Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me to present today at Forum Autodesk 2014. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time ever in Warsaw, and I'm looking forward to a great event today. So I am going to be talking to you about the future of design, taking a look at some of the technology that Autodesk is investing in, some of the technology that we're already right in the middle, some of the technology that we're looking forward to. And before we go too far in here, I just wanted to kind of comment that Autodesk has a vision, and you saw some of this vision earlier in the video that you saw of some of our customers who have created some amazing visual effects, some amazing buildings, some amazing machines. But our vision at Autodesk is to help people imagine, design, and create a better world, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, probably talking about all day. So I've decided to kind of focus on three different things because we could talk about so many things. We're going to start off by talking about the cloud, and then we're going to talk a little bit about reality capture, and then last but not least, one of my favorite topics, 3D printing. Something that Autodesk is extremely focused on this year. So a couple of years ago, Autodesk asked me to start doing presentations about the cloud because we believe that this technology is going to really help us take our designs further. And so I did a lot of research because the cloud can be very, very confusing. I mean, we hear about the cloud all the time. We have the iCloud and the Microsoft cloud, and we have fluffy clouds, and we have revision clouds, and we have point clouds, and it just sounded a little confusing to me. So I started out by asking, to me, the most basic question was, why do we call it the cloud? Have you ever thought about that? Why don't we call it the sun or the moon or the stars or the floor? Why do we call it the cloud? And I've traveled all over the world asking this question, and I've actually never really had one person that could tell me the answer to that question. So I'm going to fill you all in, so you're all going to know why we call it the cloud. We call it the cloud because of this gentleman right here. His name is John McCarthy. He was a professor at Stanford University in the United States. And back in 1961, he made a very prophetic statement. He said that computation may someday be organized as a public utility. And you're like, what does that have to do with the cloud? We'll get there. We'll get there, all right? So basically what he was saying is that at some point in time, we might be able to access our software the same way that we access our electricity. For example, if we want to access electricity, we can plug in. We don't have a power plant in our backyard, hopefully, but we can access that electricity across a network, and when we're done, we can unplug it. We usually only pay for what we use, right? So he made a statement that someday we would be accessing our software the same way that we access our utilities, which still has nothing to do with the word cloud, right? But we're getting there. So he specifically referred to the telephone industry. And in the early days of the telephone industry, just so you know, the network was called the cloud. And that is actually the reason today that we refer to this amazing technology of the cloud because of this gentleman, because he made this prophetic statement. And just a little bit of trivia about this gentleman. He's known as the father of artificial intelligence, and I'm sure some of you out there know AutoCAD. He's also the person that wrote the programming language Lisp. So he's got quite an extensive background, and some of you might have remember or seen a movie about the very first chess game that you could play against the computer. He's also the person that developed that. So he's a brilliant man, and when it came time to decide what we were going to call this technology, they referenced back his comments, and that is why we call it the cloud. It's kind of a long story to find out why we call it the cloud. And what does the cloud look like? So that is a cloud. That's not what we're talking about today, right? It doesn't look like that. It looks a little bit more like this. When we talk about the cloud, we're talking about the 50 million servers worldwide, that number's probably higher now, that we have the ability to access to do complicated computational activities. In true cloud technology, you would no longer be limited to the hardware that you could afford or that your company decided that you could have, because you would have access to all of these servers and be able to do anything that was really taxing for a computer, for a personal computer, you could do that using all of these servers, which are all over the world. So we take a look at the 3 primary reasons to use the cloud, and this is according to Lynn. There are 3 different, I see, main reasons to use the cloud. There's the mobile aspect of it, which we'll talk about, where you can store and access your data from anywhere. We all get that. I don't know about you, but I can access my bank account from anywhere as long as I have an internet connection, right? As long as I can plug in, as long as I have the internet connection, I can get to my money, make changes to my money, my pictures. We're all very familiar with the mobile aspect of the cloud and the advantages that it has brought to us. We also have the collaboration aspect, which I think is really going to change design in the future, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Being able to collaborate with people all over the world on your design as long as they have an internet connection and they can access the cloud. And then last but not least, the absolutely most important aspect to me of the cloud is the computational ability, being able to deal with large amounts of data, lots and lots of variables, and not being restricted to the hardware that we have, being able to really take advantage of that computational power. And that's going to change things completely. That's going to be a huge difference. So let's start off by talking about the most common concept. When we think of the cloud, we'll talk about the mobile aspect. Now, if you take a look at the workstations that we have today, and you take a look at the tablet, which so many people have. How many of you have a tablet? Okay, quite a few of you. All right. So if you look at the power that the tablet has today, it's estimated to be as powerful as the personal computer 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we were able to do quite a bit in design on our personal computer. And I think we all believe that the workstation, that the tablets are going to become more and more powerful as time goes on. And at some point, maybe we wouldn't be surprised if we were using a tablet to do our everyday work. And if you take a look at the future, our next generation, they don't even think anything about tablets and mobile technology. So this is a girl under the age of 10, a baby, who's very familiar and comfortable with the tablet, but doesn't understand why her magazine doesn't work the same way. You can see she's trying to zoom in. She's leaving. And at some point in time, she's actually going to believe that maybe her finger is not working. So she's checking. It's not working. It's not working. So she'll try it on herself. Nope, still works. Still seems to be working okay. So I think that it's very clear that our next generation is going to be very comfortable with the tablets. They're going to expect tablet technology. It's just going to be second nature to them. So we need to make sure that we keep up with that technology as far as the cloud is concerned in the mobile aspect. And also, I thought I'd show you, this is the Pope inauguration in 2005. Take a look at that same scene in 2013. Things have definitely changed a lot. Then I did a little research on technology in general. We talked about the telephone earlier, that's because of the telephone industry is why we call it the cloud to begin with. It took quite a bit of time before the telephone was actually adopted. Imagine trying to sell the first telephone. Who am I going to call? Well, nobody right now. Someday you'll be able to call somebody else. So the adoption of technology back in the early 1900s was very slow. But then more technology came out, and we started to think maybe some of this stuff will really work. You can see that people understood the refrigerator right away. Keeps things cold. Makes sense. Radio shot up. You can see we're starting to adopt technology faster over the years. Dishwashers and microwaves. You can see where the cell phone started to really, really took off very quickly because we started to adopt technology so much faster. But now take a look at tablets and smartphones, Facebook, the internet, just to kind of drill that down. We don't think about technology the way we used to. We don't second guess it. We just jump on it now. And the more we jump on technology, the further we're going to go. Much, much faster than we did before. So we have quite a few apps that take advantage of mobile technology. This just happens to be one of them, one of my favorites, BIM 360 Field, which allows you to take that mobile technology to take the best the cloud has to offer and take it out into the field, specifically for the construction industry. Here he was able to take a look at a pump that was installed, be able to check to see if there were any issues with it, and he can actually take a look at the model of the pump, take a look at how it's supposed to be installed, and you can put little push pins on there if there are any issues, or you can read any issues that were previously assigned. This is amazing technology in a field like construction where 90% of the technology stays in the office or it stays in the trailer. Now you can take that technology out to the field. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about collaboration. We'll still be talking about mobile, but let's talk a little bit about collaboration. So Autodesk 360 came out a couple of years ago, and we recently rebranded it as A360, and we gave it a lot more capabilities. So how many of you have opened an Autodesk 360 account or an A360 account? It's pretty good, pretty good. So if I were to explain A360 in its lowest life form, I would say if nothing else, it is an amazing backup system for your design. You open up an A360 account and you can set up your software, your Revit software, your Civil 3D software, your Inventor software. You can set it up so that every time you do a save, not only does it save to your local drive or to your network, however you work in the office, but it will also save your file up to your A360 account. If things go terribly badly, let's say you go home and you get sick or something and you need to get something added onto your Revit model. As long as you have an internet connection, you can go up to your A360 account, you can grab that model, and you can make changes to it. You can post it back up, share it with your manager maybe, or whoever you need to share it with, and then you can go back to sleep and get all better, eat some chicken soup, whatever. So A360, that's the lowest life form. If for nothing else, it's a great backup system. Everybody gets 5 gigabytes. If you're on subscription, you get 25 gigabytes. And you can, of course, purchase more if you need to, right? But it's much more than that, all right? So as time goes on, A360 has definitely evolved. Now it has amazing viewing capabilities. This model is 1.5 terabytes by Beck Systems. If you've worked with Revit for any extensive amount of time, you know that the larger the Revit model, the slower you will go. Sharing the Revit model with other people has been challenging. This is in real time. This has not been sped up. You can see as you're twirling and you're turning the model, there is some degradation, but when you stop, that model looks great. And as long as you're working with somebody else who has an A360 account, if they have a login for A360, you can share your model with anybody. It's totally up to you who you share it with. But what a great way to show the building owner how you've been working on the model and how far along you are. So in addition to that, when working with a Revit model, it's nice to look at it, but it's even better if you can get some of the data out of the Revit model. This is also linked into A360. This is amazing technology, once again, where you can work and collaborate with other team members, and the people that you've decided are allowed to work with the model can go in and mine some of the data, find the information needed about the model. I know we have some manufacturing people out here, so I didn't want to just stick to buildings. So same idea. Let's say that you're working on this robot arm and you need to make some modifications to it. From within your A360 account, you can actually go up to Fusion 360, which I'm sure you'll be able to hear a lot about today. Make some modifications to the model, repost it up to the A360 website, and let your team members know that you've made some modification, all part of the collaboration efforts. So maybe now you want to run some simulation on it to make sure that the changes that you made are not going to have a bad effect on the model. You can see that there's a few areas that are red. We've learned that when it comes to simulation, that red is bad. So maybe you would need to make some comments to your team to let them know that as a part of simulation, you're realizing that there may be some additional changes that have to be made. And then, of course, we can't go on without documentation. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the absolutely free program, AutoCAD 360. That would allow me to do some documentation on this robot arm. One of the great things about AutoCAD 360 is it's also very mobile. You can download your files to your tablet, and you can view them from anywhere, make markups on them from anywhere, with or without an internet connection. And free. We all love free, right? So as I mentioned to you, the part that I personally get the most excited about is the fact that using the cloud, we can do things that we could never do before. We can process large amounts of information with many, many variables, things that we would never even think about, like simulation, for example. You know, before the cloud, you would really think too much about simulation, not on an everyday means, because it was too complicated, it took too much time, and definitely too much compute power. So let me just show you a picture I took in South Africa. This was at a university in South Africa, a student who didn't want someone to touch his computer because it was rendering. Rendering is a perfect example of being able to harness the ability of the cloud. Now, how many of you have done a rendering at some point in time? All right, so how many of you have done a rendering that takes longer than a day? 3 days? A week? Do we have anybody who's done a rendering? We have a couple people who've done it longer than a week. 2 weeks? 3 weeks? At the end of 3 weeks, you hope you get it right. Am I right? You don't want to have to start that all over again. This is the perfect, and that's why there's notice here, right? The student is like, don't touch anything. I want my rendering to finish. And if you've done rendering, you totally understand that. In addition to when you are doing rendering, even when it takes a lot of time like that, it's also very difficult for you to use your computer to do anything else because it's so focused on doing the rendering. So that's a perfect example of the cloud. With the cloud, you take all the information that you need to do the rendering, you put that up there in the cloud, let the cloud take advantage of all that great computing power with all the servers, let it do all that hard work for you. You can keep using your computer, and then when it's finished with the rendering, it'll send you an email letting you know, hey, here it is, click on a link, and there is your final rendered image. Something that used to take 24 hours, now we're down to 24 minutes or less. Fabulous. Perfect example of really taking advantage of the cloud. And here we have BIM 360 Glue, which is another one of my favorite cloud applications that allows you to do things like clash detection, something that normally could be very, very complicated and take a lot of time. It supports over 50 different file types. And in our world, we don't all work with the same software, so that's a really big bonus. But as you can see on here, it'll go through the model, and like I said, it takes many different file types and puts it together up on the cloud, and it's going to check it to see if there's any interference, see if we need to make any changes. With the perfect hope, of course, of someday making it to the construction phase without having any clashes. You can see here, unfortunately, it found quite a few clashes, but then you can send emails to the teams that are responsible. You can direct them back here to the model so they can see the problem at hand. And as you often know, when we fix one thing, we often break another. So you can just keep running that simulation and the clash detection until you hopefully get a clash-free model. Then I thought I'd just also bring up Sim 360 as well for those of you in manufacturing. Being able to simulate as you're designing is an amazing capability. So here we have a set of headphones where they ran simulation on it, and they found there were some issues. So right there, as you're still designing, you can make changes, and you can continuously run the simulation to make sure that you're producing a quality product. All right, we're shifting gears now. Now we're moving on to reality capture. Also very, very fun. So that is a building. Somebody went out there with the camera and took a bunch of pictures of that building, and using a program called Recap Photo, took those pictures, put them together, and created a 3D model. You can see it's a point cloud. You can see as it's right here, definitely it's made up of a bunch of dots, X, Y, Z coordinates. But that's pretty impressive. All from photographs. That's where our technology is leading us to. So let's talk just a little bit about Recap. Now, if you have any of our hero products like Revit or Civil 3D or Inventor or AutoCAD, you probably saw there was an install for Recap. Recap is absolutely free of charge. It's installed automatically. Maybe you chose not to install it. But Recap is there to help those of you who work with point clouds. Now, how many of you work with point clouds? Okay, just a few of you. Does everybody know what a point cloud is? Yes? No? Yes? Yes, we have. All right, okay. So point clouds are made up of a bunch of dots. If I wanted to modify this room, maybe I don't have a DWG file or I don't have a Revit file, I would have to get my measuring tape out or something along those lines, and I would have to measure this room, and I'd have to redocument it all, which would take me some time. Or I could put a 3D scanner right in the middle of this room. It would go send rays. It would send out to all the corners of the rooms. It would grab the X and Y, Z coordinates of everything it ran into, and it would create something called a point cloud. Now, point clouds can be really large. They can be billions of points. And one of the things about point clouds that's a negative is that they can really slow your software down. If you bring 10 billion points into Revit, I think you might not be surprised if it slowed you down a little bit. That's where Recap comes in. Recap's going to take those point clouds, it's going to tighten them all up, it's going to make them efficient, it's going to stitch them together and create a usable point cloud that you can use inside of your software. So most of us start with a blank slate of paper like you see here. But in reality, everything starts in some type of an environment. This is a point cloud that was brought into Revit. This is of a tech shop that happens to be in California. And maybe I just needed to add a wall or a door or something like that. Maybe I don't have a join file. Maybe I don't have the Revit model. If I'm just going to make some minor modifications, maybe I don't want to go to all the trouble to create one from scratch. This is kind of what I was talking about before. We usually start with an empty slate. Reality capture absolutely allows you to design in context. So let's take a look at that same, oh, not quite yet, sorry. Just kind of taking a look at how we've modified our use of point clouds over the years. If you look over here in our 2013 products, you could bring 2 billion points into AutoCAD or Revit or Civil 3D or Inventor. You can see with our 2015 products, you can bring in over 20 billion. They work better, they work faster, and they certainly look more realistic. So here we have, back into Revit, we have that tech shop model. And we are going to just go in and add a wall and a door. We're going to have a mixed environment. We're going to have an environment of points, X, Y, Z coordinates, and we're also going to have a real-life door object and a real-life wall object inside of Revit. Inside of AutoCAD, inside of Inventor, inside of Civil 3D, and inside of Revit, you can snap to this geometry and work with it. You can see. So we've taken Recap one step further, and we've recently been aligning ourselves with GoPro. I'm sure many of you are familiar with GoPro. I'm going to show you a very short video here of a gentleman who's decided to take this bunker, which is in the California area of the United States, and they're going to make some modifications to this and actually design a building to put in its place. Now, the gentleman who's doing this video has only used Revit for 2 days, so I want you to take that into consideration. He's using a quadcopter. This quadcopter takes pictures every 5 seconds. And it has music, so hold on. Loud music. most important part is the dog at the end of the video. Amazing technology. I can promise you there are no AutoCAD drawing files for that bunker. He was able to take a snapshot of the existing conditions, create a fabulous point cloud out of it, and then pull it into Revit and start to do some designing. So, amazing technology. And then last but not least, I'm going to end talking about 3D printing, something, as I mentioned to you before, that Autodesk is very, very actively involved in. This is very different from mass manufacturing. This is very personal manufacturing where you can make modifications on an individual basis. Personal manufacturing, 3D printing is coming down to a level that more and more of us can afford. It works differently than regular manufacturing because different types of materials are layered one on top of each other, which actually allows you to design some things that would have been very, very difficult to design before. And we see it in so many different ways. We see it, for example, in shoes, Nike shoes. You can go to the Nike website and you can pick out the color of your shoes, the size of your shoes, the material of your shoes, any designs you want those shoes to have, the bottom of the shoes. You can completely customize it for you. Of course, they'll charge you some money, but eventually you'll end up with some shoes in the mail. Completely customizable tennis shoes. Or some of you may have seen some of the 3D dresses that people have been wearing. Once again, because it's so personal, you can give the exact size of somebody's body and you can design a dress to fit it perfectly, or any type of wardrobe, any type of wardrobe. You here have a guitar. Somebody wants to design a guitar that fits him just perfectly. Here we actually have a plane where bits and pieces were 3D printed and put together. I don't know if I'd want to fly in that plane, but probably, to me, the most powerful of all of this technology is the ability at some point in time, hopefully, to be able to print organs, and I'm sure that many of you have heard about that. If you take a look at this process, it's a very interesting process, at least it is to me. We have, of course, thousands and thousands of people who die every year because they can't get the organs that they need from a transplant. If there was some way we could 3D print those organs, it would save many, many people's lives. It's basically, we can get the exact shape of the organ that is needed for somebody because we can personalize it by grabbing the information from an MRI and turning that into a 3D model. And one of the most difficult things about transplants is that they have a tendency to reject, the body has a tendency to reject those organs. We have the ability, when you're dealing with 3D printing, to take the actual cells from the person who needs the organ and put them in the organic material that's used to define the the organ that will eventually go into their body. It's amazing, amazing technology. And there are actual 3D printers out there that are focused on doing nothing except for organs. Now, we haven't really designed a heart or a kidney or a liver or anything like that at this point and put it into anybody's body. But we've done some amazing things with this technology. And this is just a chart that I happened to find. It's a little difficult to see, but it just kind of goes over the time span that they're looking at for, how far along the road is going to be before this really becomes a reality. You can see within the, just in the next few years, you'll see things like skin being printed actually onto the patient. Great technology. You'll see some things like cartilages and discs. You can imagine how you could create a perfectly formed disc to replace a degenerated disc in somebody's back. You'll also see that as time goes on, within the next 10 years, they're going to start to look at heart valves, being able to 3D print a heart valve and put that into somebody's body and transform them. And then eventually, once again, getting to the big organs that kill people every day, the hearts, the liver, the kidneys. That would be amazing technology. And I think in our lifetime, we're actually going to see that happen. And at Autodesk, as I mentioned to you, very, very focused on 3D printing. And we really want to open up this technology for some of the reasons I was just talking about to everybody. So Autodesk does have an open 3D printing platform called Spark. It's a great name. And we also have just recently unveiled our first 3D printer. There's more of that to come as time goes on. You'll see it in more detail. It's not something we're selling this very second, but the goal behind it is it will be low cost and something that more and more people would be able to afford and use and to start to develop their 3D printing capabilities. And I'm going to end on a story about Kamal. And I love this story. So one of the things that 3D printing is fabulous at, as you can imagine, is prostheses. Because it's so personal, they can actually take a scan of any body part and they would be able to create a prosthesis that would fit perfectly. So here we have a gentleman by the name of Kamal. He's a pretty young boy. And Kamal lost his leg above the knee in a motorcycle accident. Every year, 3 million people lose their legs over the knee. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. And you might think that most of it is from landmines or something like that, but in reality, it's from motorcycle accidents, it's from car accidents. But it's a very, very difficult prosthesis to fit, and it's very, very expensive. I know that in the United States, if we had somebody in the armed forces who lost their leg as a result of being in the military, we would fit them with a prosthesis that costs about $20,000. Kamal's family makes $40 a year. He's never going to be able to afford a $20,000 prosthetic limb. So he consequently was using a bamboo stick, which of course was really hard on his back, difficult to walk on, but that was technically his only option. So this wonderful company called D-Rev decided that they were going to come out with a prosthetic knee that had a full range of motion, that was going to be inexpensive, that people all over the world could use and could afford. So using 3D printing, using materials that were affordable, they were able to come out with something known as the diaper knee for $80. Almost all families, in some way, shape, or form, can afford $80 to replace somebody's limb. And take a look at the comments up here. It's very, very quiet. That's a problem of the inexpensive prosthetics, as they have a tendency to click, because they work on one axis. They're very loud, very noisy, and embarrassing for people actually to be using. They have a high range of motion. You can kneel, you can squat, you could pray if you needed to. You can actually ride a bike on them, which I think is pretty amazing. They last for a long time. You don't have to have any special equipment or tools to install them and to use them. They're water resistant and they weigh less than a pound. So I'm a big fan of this company and all the hard work that they went into really making the world a better place by designing the diaper knee. So on that note, I'm going to go back to what we originally said, that our vision is to help people imagine, design, and create a better world. And I like to think that's why you're all here today, because you aim to create and design better buildings, more energy efficient, or perhaps you're designing cars or engines or whatever it is you're designing in the world. Maybe you're a civil engineer and going to be taking a look at the land. But what I really hope is that as you go through the sessions today, that you start to really envision about how you can make the world a better place. And I hope that you will let Autodesk know how we can help you get there. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to turn it back over to you. Right?